if you think about the game plans that both Harris and Trump wanted to execute, Harris wanted to what? Introduce herself, perhaps distance herself from Biden, and really provoke Trump into going into tirades and going off message. She clearly succeeded in doing that. Trump's game plan was to stay focused on the issues of immigration and the economy, and he got distracted. And if I just think of it in terms of body language and in terms of the variety of things which we'll talk about today, Harris won on so many different scores. But I'm going to bring up something. I think everybody's going to say she won. The Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post said she won. Swing voters interviewed said she won. But most of the swing voters are saying they're still not sure if it really mattered in terms of how they're going to vote.
Yeah, John, it was one of those things that David points out in terms of it's okay to say this was great entertainment. It might have been one of the most engaging bits of debate television I've seen in a long time. But did it move the needle?
Yeah, and I agree totally with David. We bring to debates a construct in our minds that is often based on experience with debates, looking at real debates in terms of whether you can win points or not on policy and things like that, about, how it looks overall, but also how we see the world. And if you see the world as a place that's stable and that you can have rational discussions and that you are not going to take in people who are rude and interrupt and do those sort of things, well, then she clearly won. But what we've witnessed in the polls for the longest time, and I will point out in the national polls now, either tied or slightly ahead is Donald Trump, that doesn't really matter to the people who vote for him. What really matters, and what caught my attention last night, is that if the United States election is swung on, let's say, 400,000 votes, I mean, let's put it that way. In some of these swing states, it's 50 to 150,000 people who decide to go to the polls and vote one way or the other. Then what Kamala Harris said last night when it came to the invasion of Ukraine is that she targeted the 80,000 Polish residents in Pennsylvania in terms of how they would feel about the United States stepping away from the table and allowing Putin to go in and do everything that they've done. So we're talking about micro-targeting there, and we're also talking about a population that has become used to this president, former president, for the last many, many years and still holds half the country. So, I mean, if this was Canada and you were looking at 5 parties, and if you could get power with 34% of the vote, last night would have been done, dinner, finished. But I don't think so. Even he got 30% more talking times because the moderators didn't shut off the mic, and he was able to address his group. So I think, as I said earlier today to another individual, we're going to have to wait for probably another 5 to 6 days to find out in the public domain the polling results that give a bounce one way or the other. And even if there is a bounce, the question is then, before Election Day, does this matter?
Well, let me ask you this, though. I realize the numbers are – sorry, David. I realize the numbers are important as far as the polls are concerned. But the one I'm going to watch is the amount of money she raises. I suspect that was an incredible fundraising opportunity for her last night.
It probably was, but I still want to come back to the poll numbers again and the moving of public opinion, because dollars are important, but at some point, remember, it's about votes at the end of the day. And first I was going to say with John, you're an optimist saying 400,000. I think it's about 200,000 voters myself, but we can quibble. We can quibble with how many people she actually has to move at this point, but it's an incredibly small number of people that have to be moved at this point. And it's still just not clear at this point that she moved, because the debate really wasn't about changing Trump voters' minds. They're solid behind him. Nothing she's going to do is going to convince Trump voters to say, gosh, I'm not going to vote for Trump now. It's motivating her base, and at the same time, remember, it's only about 2%, 3% of the voters are undecided, is moving those few people. I actually think the most significant thing that happened last night, Taylor Swift saying she's going to vote for Kamala Harris. I actually think that's far more important, because the people who support her, Taylor Swift, generally don't vote. If they actually come out and vote, that could make a bigger impact on the election.
I thought the timing of that was just brilliant in terms of earned media. You had to know, John, that the whole endorsement from Taylor Swift was part of the package, that Harris had to have known that this was coming all the while she was baiting Trump.
Yeah, and again, David, I think Dave and I are on the same wavelength this morning. And again, it's about the construct of elections and how you use media nowadays. You can raise as much money as you want, but unless you, in fact, have bought up all of that time, which Trump's party had done during the summer for all the advertising in the swing states, if you don't control the social media part of it either, then you're not going to win this election. So having Taylor Swift immediately do this energizes the Democratic base, but more importantly, young women, for which Kamala Harris holds the lion's share of the vote over her opponent. If she can motivate a few 100,000 more votes at those polls in those swing states and across the country, that's going to make a huge difference. So again, if a celebrity 10 years ago had endorsed a candidate, you'd say, well, there's Jimmy Buffett or whoever, no, that's going to matter to people who were in the 60s and want this kind of president. So that doesn't matter anymore. That did last night. So I think you got to look at the little pieces, because that's what this election is all about, motivating small groups of people. And that really hit.